Hi everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. This is episode 3 of Lightspace, so I'm really happy that everyone has come today. Scott and Jackie and Jeff, all of you, so thank you so much. So today I kind of wanted to open it up to one of my favorite topics. Is something that I've been interested in even since I was a kid. So the paranormal, in terms of just questions and seeing where the conversation lies. I've learned a lot from my work as a QHHT practitioner. I think everyone who's here already knows me and what I do, but just in case, a QHHT practitioner is a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner. It's a type of hypnosis that actually is deeply spiritual, really gets you in touch with your higher self and spirit guides, also accessing past lives, future lives, sometimes not lifetimes. You access energy within the universe, so it's really amazing and miraculous process that is always a humbling and honoring experience to have with clients and with people, and I've learned a lot. And the paranormal, it's one of those things that seems kind of common every day. A lot of us have questions about it. Do spirits exist? Why are they around? Are there things to be afraid of? And so I'm excited to be able to just answer any questions that you might have. I mean, I'll start off, and I don't think it's surprising that spirits, ghosts, they do exist. Energy is neither created or destroyed, so we are spiritual beings, so we do have to go somewhere eventually, especially when we leave the physical body. And also, we do have a soul that is eternal, that is infinite. So it would only make sense that there would be some type of spirits that would not immediately leave the earth plane, I guess would be the best way to put it. So I've had actually several clients. I've had clients who've come to me asking, for example, I have, I live in a space that my grandfather used to live in, or a family member used to live in. We were really close. And I feel like that he or she's around. I had one client in particular who her grandfather used to live in this barn house, was behind her own house, that she eventually moved into. They had a really close relationship, and she started working after high school, but she always felt like her grandfather, who was a kind of a prankster, would play jokes on her. Things would move. One time or a couple times, she would actually leave to go to work in the mornings, and her front door would be locked from the outside, and she wouldn't be able to get out. And so she always had these questions about whether or not it was her grandfather. And in the session, I asked if that was in fact the case, that she was her grandfather there with her. And it came through her session from not only her higher self and her spirit guides, but her grandfather as well, saying, yeah, it's me. Absolutely. Why are you even questioning it? So it's little things like that, intuitions and things that we might have from day to day, about if people are with us who've passed over or crossed over. Sometimes, and a lot of times, is the case, especially if we have that sense. So that's one example. There's one that was really powerful for me in terms of a session with a client who went into a past lifetime where she was a witch. Not a witch, but accused of being a witch. And the entirety of the lifetime was pretty dramatic. She was basically kind of a naturopath. She lived out in the forest, and people came to, or outside of this town, and people would come to visit her kind of in secret, for healing and for guidance and natural remedies. And she eventually, I won't go through the whole lifetime, she eventually met a man who ended up being actually in the government of this town. And because she was not part of that town, she didn't know that he was married, and they ended up having a relationship. And then she also had who she considered to be a friend, another man who had come to bring her flowers and books and things, and he became jealous and told someone within the town about the quote-unquote affair, and she was arrested and put at the stake, or hung on the stake and burned. And that's what she saw. Fortunately, part of the hypnosis that the QHHT that I practice and other practitioners do, we're trained to take someone out of that. So right off the bat in that lifetime, she was tied to the stake. There was people in the town square, and she was saying, someone's going to burn me, or I'm going to burn. And so I took her out of it, and she watched herself burn at the stake, and it was extremely traumatic for her. And I asked her, how are you feeling? What's going on? And she's like, I just look like a piece of meat that is hanging. And she was just so upset. She was like, I just don't understand how people could do this to another human being. I don't understand this. I don't understand it. And then eventually what happened is I thought the life was over. And then she said, wait. There's someone coming up to me. Everyone's gone, but it was the man who used to bring her the books and the gifts and everything else. And he took her down from the stake and started putting flowers and oil on her body. And then eventually buried her under a tree. And so I asked her what happened. Did she leave? Did she stay on the spirit side? Did she decide to go into the light, as most spirits usually do? And she said, no, I actually stayed there. And I asked her what she would do, or what she did. And she said, I just stayed in the town square. I threw rocks around, and I kind of laughed, and I asked, was it to scare people? And she was like, no. She said it was just to remind them of that I was there, and that of what they did to me. And then I asked how long she stayed there, and she said that I waited for this man who ended up being one of her soulmates, or basically someone that she's had numerous lifetimes with. She waited for him to pass away, and he would come visit her grave every day. And the funny story, well, it's not really funny, but when he passed over finally, I asked what it was like when he crossed over to the other side, and she said, he's laughing at me. And I said, why is he laughing at you? And she said, he's just laughing because I waited for him. The tragic turn was that he didn't go into the light with her. He went directly back to Earth. So that was kind of my introduction in terms of, okay, so the paranormal is legitimate, and someone is speaking to me right now who was in spirit form, and telling me what happened and why she stayed. So that's one example. So I'll go ahead and pose questions as we go along. Poetic Justice. Jeff, do spirits from your experience lie dormant for lifetimes? There are cases that essentially, basically after you pass away, usually what happens is when you cross over to the other side, there will be someone who's waiting for you. It's usually someone from that lifetime that you just left. It also can be a kind of a soul energy that you've had numerous lifetimes with that you reunite with. There's sometimes that, for example, it might be a loved one who passed away who was, elderly, but they chose a form of them being kind of young and in their prime. So there's always this kind of reunion. the interesting thing is that typically when you're about to pass away, because we do choose the time and how we will pass away, there's kind of rehearsals. So typically these loved ones who meet with you, also your guides, will also kind of take you through the process so that the death process is easier and more seamless. Pain is never a factor. That's actually something we choose, which is kind of hard to wrap our heads around sometimes, especially when we're in a lot of pain. But that kind of happens. But then in terms of laying dormant, so sometimes souls, or actually the soul is kind of the eternal aspect, our spirit is what's here with us now in our physical form, have traumatic deaths that are, whether it be something from an outside force. And so, for example, if you were murdered or tragically died, sometimes even though we choose our time and death, sometimes our choices lead us in a direction or a path that we do die when we're not supposed to. I still have questions about that with the higher selves, but they kind of just say that happens. But in those cases, if it's an extremely traumatic life, an extremely traumatic death, there is kind of, it's a hospital on the other side. It's also called the resting place, and it's where souls will go to, or spirits will go to lay dormant. Could be for a short while. It could be 10 years. It could be 100 years. It could be thousands of years, in order to kind of recuperate. So that is a legitimate question in terms of there are times that that's necessary. And it's also remembering 1,000 years here could be a blink of an eye on the spirit side, because we have our concept of time and everything else. So definitely, yes, that's a great question. Let's see. So thank you for that question. Let's see, Anne. Whoops. What's happening? Okay, so Anne, I smelled my mother-in-law's favorite perfume within 30 minutes after she passed, Chanel number 5. Now whenever I smell it, I think of her. Yeah. I mean, I definitely that's the case. I mean, there is always the process when the spirit's leaving. Sometimes, they do stay around to say goodbye. And I've been told that whenever, things like the perfume or things that remind you of a loved one, even 10, 15 years down the road, that is them. And that is them just kind of sometimes maybe popping in saying, hello, hi, I'm here. So it's something to keep with you, and it's almost like a gift from the spirit side to know that when you have that smell of that perfume, that is your loved one who's with you. So let's see, questions. So I'll go ahead and talk about, so on the other side, the spirit side, there is the resting place. So that's for people who have experienced severe trauma, or spirits that have experienced a traumatic life. The other option is, it's basically the school. And it is, I mean, we're always learning, period. So Earth is a school. And then the other side, the school is obviously much more metaphysical. So I've had clients who actually have seen it and been there when they passed away, that they go to the school, they see classrooms, they see instructors, which are usually energy beings, and they'll be learning about, how to be a good human, or there will be other beings learning other things. And so this is specifically designed for basically spirits that need a little extra guidance. Uh, so typically, people who have not lived the best lives go back to school, so to speak, and spend a long time there. And I have not had this client, but I know that Dolores Cannon, who created QHHT and the hypnosis technique, did ask questions about Hitler and what happened after he passed. And it essentially, it was, he had to go back to school for a very long time. So it kind of counters the ideas of hell that we have a little bit. Is in the greater scheme of things, I've been told, everything is love and there's no judgment, right or wrong, even as horrible as it might seem. And, we're all here to progress and learn. So that's kind of the flip side of the resting place. So Scott asked, if pain is not a factor, why would we choose it to go out that way? I have close to zero tolerance for pain, not a fan. That's a great question. However, it's pain is a choice. How that works, I'm not really sure. There are those, kind of the, the spiritual, highly spiritual people on the planet that are able to do pretty incredible feats that would cause the everyday person a lot of pain. So that's kind of how I best think of that. When it comes to death, death is never painful. So it's, your spirit is essentially outside of the body before it even occurs. And your physical body does respond to things, but it's not you're not present when it occurs. So that's tricky for me to understand as well. Especially, part of the hypnosis that we do in QHHT is to take people out if something pretty traumatic is happening. But that also applies to just not to death, but things that might have occurred in a lifetime where they didn't die or pass away, but was very painful and would be upsetting for anyone to experience. So, yeah, I wish I could master the no pain, that choice. Why we choose it would have to essentially be part of our plan. There might be some aspects that we decided to choose pain in a lifetime to learn from, which would also be kind of difficult to really deal with and comprehend. Hello. Hi, Kelly. Welcome. All right. So I'll go ahead and talk about, unless if other people have questions, I'll keep kind of talking. So there are different reasons why that spirits stay behind. One case is, there might have been something that happened that was extreme. It could be a case where you did have a very quick death. And I mean, I think a lot of people know about the fact that sometimes you don't realize you've passed away. And that is one of the most common aspects of kind of the paranormal. Also, for example, the witch story, she chose to stay because she wanted to wait for her soulmate. So that is another case. Another reason is that we, specifically for people or spirits that become so connected with the physical reality that they can't leave a home, or they feel so connected to someone that they don't want to leave them behind. Kind of the whole, unresolved issues, or they feel like that there was something that they needed to complete that didn't happen. I had one client one time where I won't go into the details, but she had a really close relationship with her brother. They had no parents, and they were probably late teens, early 20s. It came out later that they were living in England, and then her brother decided that he was going to board a ship to go to America. She forced herself on the trip. She wanted to go and didn't want to be left behind. In that time period, she expressed that it wasn't typical for a woman to really, go on those types of trips where she was, but she just wouldn't have it and being left behind. So she kind of described going on the ship, and she felt really uncomfortable because she was the only female. And then she had never been on a ship before, so she was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And eventually, something happened on the ship, and I know from history that there was a lot of cases where the food would go bad on ships. And so she ended up getting extremely sick on this boat, and was physically in the session, was rocking back and forth and saying that she felt like she was going to throw up. And I really got to the point where I was like, is she really going to throw up? Which would not have been a good thing. But then eventually she passed, and I asked what had happened, and she's like, the food went bad and a lot of people on the ship are dying. And she was actually more upset of just how many people were died and affected by it. And so I asked her, once she was on the spirit side, what happened? Did she stay? Did she move on? Did she go into the light? And she was like, no, I wanted to stay with my brother. So she stayed with him, and she said that they eventually reached America, and he joined the military in some capacity, and she witnessed his death. But the really strange thing is even though he crossed over, she still stayed, and she was like, I don't know why I'm still here. Because she said that I'm looking at his gravestone, and I don't understand why I'm still here. And I asked, how long were you there? And she was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm stuck here. So it never really actually came out why she was held there. So in the hypnosis, when we contact the higher self, and why a client was shown particular lifetimes, because that's how it basically works. I asked why she was stuck there, and the higher self said that her lifetime wasn't complete, that she wasn't aware of it, but she wasn't supposed to go on the boat trip, but she had forced herself onto the boat, and that wasn't in her life plan. And so in essence, her lifetime was cut short. So this was another case of, it wasn't necessarily that she chose to stay. She didn't know why she was stuck there, but it was a matter of she didn't finish what she went there to do. So, and it was kind of a learning experience for me that, sometimes, making choices and being aware of intuitions like, don't go on the boat, don't go on the boat, don't go on the boat, is so important, because we obviously didn't plan it, and that we have other things that we should have completed. So that's another aspect of why spirits exist, why spirits sometimes are stuck on the earth plane. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. Let's see. So quiet. Yeah, feel free to ask questions. I love answering questions. I like the interaction. So what else? So I guess the next one, or another way that what I've learned from doing the hypnosis, is that sometimes spirits are stuck to the earth plane because of loved ones who are still living. So it has been expressed to me that basically the grieving process that a lot of us, feel that we should go through, and this is usually kind of a contentious topic for people, or controversial topic. But higher selves have explained that grieving shouldn't be an extensive process, because the longer we grieve, the longer people are held to the earth. And I kind of found that interesting, just because, we're taught to go through the grieving process, or we choose not to grieve, and sometimes it sneaks up on us a while later. But there are cases where people are unable to let go of a loved one. And I've also been told that, it's almost, when we cannot accept that a loved one has passed away, that it's almost forgetting who we are as spiritual beings, that we do have multiple lifetimes, and that it isn't a goodbye, it's just a see you later on the other side type thing. And it became increasingly apparent when I had a client who, she had a lifetime and she passed away, and her husband, who was her survivor, was devastated by her death, and she couldn't go into the light because he was actually holding her there by holding the grief and the pain. And it was extremely frustrating for her, because she tried everything she could to really communicate with him. She was stuck she was obviously in their home. She tried to get his attention. She would move objects and other things like that, and he would not pay attention, just because he was so consumed in his own grief. And essentially, she was stuck there for the entirety of the rest of their lives. And she in the lifetime was actually older. So it wasn't extremely long before he passed away. But she was actually extremely upset with him when he crossed the other side, because she was there waiting for him. And she just said, "What, you held me here for all this time." And on the other side, it's forgiveness and love and everything else. So, but it really drove the point home that, when we hold so much on to the physical existence of a loved one, and we think that there isn't anything after that, and that we'll never see them again, it's forgetting who we are as spiritual beings. And so there are those cases that, if that saying is, if you have to love someone enough to let them go. I've had other cases where it's just people on the spirit side, and they have loved ones that are not letting them go, and they just want to go. So that's kind of another aspect. Okay. What lifetimes have you remembered? That's a good question. I had a session, actually, the place I live in Colorado, there aren't too many other practitioners here. So I was actually a practitioner for probably about a year before I actually had a session myself. So it was interesting in that, one, I thought that I would know as a practitioner what it would be like to go under hypnosis, because I had to describe the process to clients. So I went in with the open mind, and once it started happening, I felt like I was overly conscious, that I knew that people don't just go completely blank. But it was difficult, because it's a matter of keeping your ego at bay. And so I was trying not to get frustrated. And fortunately, the practitioner, because we swapped sessions, who I met with, she had kind of an alternative approach. So I didn't know, the whole process. She kind of used a different way. But I just saw images, or not images. I just saw colors and lights and things like that. And I was trying to go with it, and I did, and I kind of didn't know what was going on. I didn't see a lifetime. So eventually she called on my higher self, and they said that they didn't show me a lifetime because I think too much, which is totally the case. And I wouldn't do it, but if I would play my recording, most of my sessions was my higher self laughing at me and saying I think too much. Wasn't too much of an ego booster, but so I basically they said that I hadn't had a lot of lifetimes here, which kind of makes sense to me in a kind of an inner deep way. They said that I was here a long time ago, and that I was responsible, or one of the energies responsible for creating the atmosphere of the earth. And then the times that I have been here, I was various kind of different, like shaman or a druid, or what was the other one? A kahuna, which actually was really interesting because I had one of my mom had a really close friend who was a psychic, and she gave me a reading one time, and she told me I was a kahuna, and I didn't even know what that was. So yeah, I haven't had that many lifetimes. They told me I was kind of like a wizard at one point that knew how to use ley line energy, and kind of channel it from the earth and things like that, which actually really didn't surprise me that much. I don't know why. So I don't have that many lifetimes, I guess, to speak of. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't be permitted to remember, just because I would start overthinking and overanalyzing it, just because that's who I am. So that's kind of the answer. But that's not to say just because I haven't had lifetimes here, all of us have thousands and thousands of lifetimes, not just on the earth. There are many people here now who haven't had a lot of lifetimes. They've just come back to help with the earth and raising vibration and frequency and everything else as volunteers. It explained a lot to me personally. Growing up, I could kind of see why. I haven't had many lifetimes here, I think, but let's see. So thank you for that question. So Jeff, all encompassing to do, I think I missed part of your question. To do this, or their follow sections. Okay, I think I get what you're saying. So the QHHC sessions, they are designed to be kind of self-contained. That's what makes them so amazing, because other forms of hypnotherapy, well, actually this isn't really hypnotherapy, it's more of a kind of a hypno healing, I guess would be a better way to put it. But other forms of hypnotherapy, if you've experienced it, or anyone who has experienced it who's watching, it takes more than one session. With the QHHC, it's all encompassing. So I have seen a couple clients more than once, but that's more of a matter of them being more interested in. And I've had a lot of clients who kind of came in not really knowing what would come through, and then once certain things were validated for them by their higher self, they want to come back and ask more questions now that they, for example, knew that they weren't making something up, or they had an intuition that was correct. So I have seen clients more than once, but really at the core, it is supposed to be kind of a one-time session. So you'll go in and see a lifetime or two, and then those lifetimes relate to questions that you come in with. Sometimes not, if your higher self said, well, these are good questions, but he or she needs to focus on this right now. So in that, sometimes questions aren't always answered, just because there might be something more urgent for you to know. Because in the greater scheme of things, clients are sent to particular practitioners, and there's always a deeper reasoning. And as a practitioner, I kind of always learn something or connect with something with someone else. So it's definitely a deeper process than just kind of like a client going to see or a patient going to see a doctor, which I'm not a doctor. I'm just kind of giving that example. It's a deeper connection. Let's see. So the grief is another one. Another one that isn't as well known or talked about, and I experienced it with a client who did a lot of paranormal. What do you call it? The people who go out and do the paranormal research things that go to places. And he was actually, he had questions, a lot of questions, just based on his experience, with regard to that he would go to all these different places, and he had a couple of, I guess, coworkers, because it was a little business that they did. He'd go to all these locations, and there would be instances where he alone, no one else would see these things. He would see a man in different period dress, but they all looked like the same man. And so he was curious as to what that was. And so, because he said, I don't know if something's following me, but it's always kind of the same figure and form that they would, I guess, manifest for him, but would be wearing different clothing, or would look like he was doing something different, but it was never a full awareness of a spirit. Like the spirit wasn't aware of him, whatever it was as though he was just doing his own thing. So I asked, because he was genuinely worried, is something following me around? Is something attached to me? And his higher self said that basically a lot of people who do this type of work, or experimenting with paranormal and doing, going to haunted places and locations, sometimes their intention is so great that they actually begin to tap into their own past lifetimes. So they're not necessarily spirits, but rather, I guess, visions of someone else's past. So there are instances of this where we might perceive or have experiences with the paranormal. And it could be either yourself in the past lifetime, or certain spirits just reliving the same thing over and over again from their own lifetimes. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. Let's see. Yes, hello lurkers. Let's see. Oh, so Scott asks, are demons real? Yeah, we kind of touched on this the last time. Yeah, so I'll kind of say what I said last time. So I can expand on a little bit more. In the greater scheme of things, everything is positive. Well, most everything is positivity and light. However, the thing that we're not really taught to recognize is that we are extremely powerful manifestors. What we believe becomes our reality. And so the general sense behind demons is there's kind of two ways or two routes to go. The first has to do with elemental energies. So there are, lower frequency beings or energies that have never had, for example, a lifetime as a human. And they're almost kind of, I don't want to say baby energies in a way, but they don't have a concept of, for example, right and wrong, even though, we kind of construct that too. But the way that these energies communicate is largely through emotion, and usually violent angry emotion. So that, if you want to classify that as a demon, could be considered demonic. So that acknowledges that there are other beings, but we can also talk about, fairies, nature spirits, all of which exist in some form or some dimension. It's just that, we have more of a belief system centered around, for example, the demonic. With that said, that, our beliefs create our reality. The idea of the demonic, has been put into religious doctrines and such. And so much so that we believe it. And just by virtue of that belief, demonic forms are created. And with enough of the belief and with enough of the fear, they do manifest. So it's kind of the paradox of they don't naturally exist, but because so many people have a fear of them and so many people are taught about them, and because so many things are portrayed in like media and movies and entertainment, they do take a life of their own. So they are real, but they are not. It's just a matter of our beliefs that keeps them alive, so to say, or so to speak. So, and with that said, the elemental energies, it is something to where, and I haven't experienced this, but Dolores actually did talk about it in her work, where she asked the higher self about possession and if it really exists. And the interesting thing was the answer was, it can happen, but it's not what we have been taught or perceive it to be. That it has to do with, and it's actually extremely spiritual, in that people who do experience some type of possession almost are energetically imbalanced, and that the imbalance in, for example, their own energy field creates sort of a vortex that actually sucks in or makes accessible their own physical bodies by virtue of their not being in balance. So in a roundabout way, if you're balanced and you don't give a lot of fear and recognition to demonic forces, it shouldn't be a factor at all. But that's kind of the short version. So let's see. Yeah, I don't like talking about. I don't know. I think it's just ingrained into our psyche so much that I don't prefer to talk about the demonic. Let's see. Have you used? No. Yeah, I don't go there. Mostly because my mom, she had a story when she was a kid, and that she and her sister, they got a Ouija board, and it was in secret. And she, at the time, she and her sister had a room in the basement, and they did some readings, and she, to this day, said that it spelled out a name, and it was very scary for them, and it moved and everything else, and they threw it out. So yeah, I don't go there. It's just, I don't know. I just think it opens doorways to places that, we don't know much about. So yeah. Any other questions? Paranormal. Yeah, I also know that, the intention and the belief in what they can produce and manifest sometimes does call things in or brings spirits in who necessarily, might be ready to leave and then they're stuck there. So, it kind of goes back to being held in a place that you don't want to be when you're trying to move on. So I leave those alone. Let's see. No questions. Well, I guess another aspect, and we kind of touched on this before, is the fact that there are a lot of times that, for example, loved ones that we're close with in our lifetime can possibly choose to stay with you as a guide. So that is, kind of explains why. I mean, I think everyone kind of has a sense of some type of one being with them even after they've passed. So that definitely happens. And I think I said somewhere else that it's actually a lot of times it's a grandmother, which I don't know why, but there always seems to be that mysterious bond. And I've had something that I haven't come across a lot, and it was actually one of the first clients who I had, that she was extremely intuitive. She was extremely psychic. She was extremely gifted, and she had all these abilities. She was a hairdresser in an old building, and she would see spirits come down the steps and try and talk with her, and it terrified her, so she would just block them out. And then she had two sons who were extremely gifted, extremely psychic, and she essentially mentored them in how to really accept and work with and believe in their abilities and to feel empowered. But when it came to herself, she just had this block. She did not want anything to do with her abilities. It scared her. And it was kind of this conflict that she had. And so in her session, it actually came through that, yes, she is extremely powerful. And yes, she's had many lifetimes as seers, being accused of witch, being tortured, hanged, everything else for her abilities. And she also had questions about her guides. But the interesting thing is that usually when we call on a person's higher self, it's the higher self, or sometimes it is guides. But I was confronted, and actually it felt really threatening, was like a protector spirit, which I had never heard of. I've heard of, the guides and everything else and loved ones being with us, but I'd never read about or heard about a protector spirit. And it felt ominous, and I was nervous because it was one of my first sessions. And then, it was her, it was coming through her, but you could just feel the presence of this large something. And in my mind, I kind of saw like a samurai type figure, and I don't know why. But I asked permission to ask questions, and it was just very abrupt with me. And I even asked, I said, is this something I should be doing? Asking questions, and he just would respond, yes, it's fine. I'm her protector. And so it was a very delicate situation. Eventually, the higher self came through and explained that that he had a lifetime with her in the past, and she had been in one of those lives where she was persecuted and tortured for being who she was and being in her power. And he decided when he passed away that he was, from that lifetime forward, he was going to be her protector. So it was really interesting to know that, sometimes we do have guides, and then sometimes we do have people, loved ones who pass, that serve as our guides. But then there's also those cases where on the other side, someone that you know had a meaningful relationship in physical form decides, I'm going to protect her from now on. So that was another instance. Let's see. Hello, Kevin. Let's see. I saw something. Oh yeah. So the Ouija boards, yes. I've used one. They told me at 22 I would die at 54, and also things happen, but they do work. That thing was moving. Yeah. Yeah, I just, I don't know. I just don't like going there. Yeah. Let's see. I think I saw something else that someone asked or was talking about. Oh, years ago. Years ago, I woke up and the evil entity was present. Terrifying experience. And I chose the light, not the darkness. Yeah, I mean, the thing to always remember is that we always have the upper hand. And it's all about intention, all about, fear. Fear is just like the disease of the planet, which I've been told by the higher self. And it's also that which gives, for example, with the idea of the demonic and so many people believing it and so many being afraid of it, that it takes on a form of its own. Yeah, it's just recognizing that we do have the upper hand, we have the power, and if there is something threatening that's around you, that you do have that power to choose a light and be like, nope, not going to happen, not today. Yes, I like this. When my mom passed, I was outside walking the yard. A deer stood watching me for 4 hours. Yeah, actually, I know Kevin's here. He's the animal expert, animal spirit expert. I mean, I actually do have that connection as well with deer. Always when I make decisions or choices that are correct, that I kind of fight myself over, deer always seem to appear somehow, some way, which is always interesting. But I also know that, for example, I don't know if your mom felt connected with deer or anything like that. My grandfather was a photographer, and he was on a mission for most of his life to take a picture of a blue heron. Could never get one, and then every time my mom and I would go out hiking when I was a kid, or walking by the river or in the mountains or whatever else, we'd always see one. So it was always this joke. But now, whenever I see one, I think of my grandfather, because I know definitely it's a sign he's around, because he would get so frustrated. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So Samantha, why as children we see more and forget about it? I'm starting to remember a lot now. Yeah, to be completely honest, when we first incarnate, we take our first breath as a baby, and this has been explained to me. We have complete and full knowledge of all our lifetimes, of why we chose a particular family, a particular mother, why we're there, what we're going to do, memories of past lifetimes, where we've been. I mean, all that knowledge is there. And it's kind of funny to think about, just because, we assume largely that babies are, blank slates, which is not the case whatsoever. I had a client one time who would talk about how she had this baby that cried all the time and everything else, and she wondered if there was something wrong. And the higher self said, it's because she really wants to talk and she can't. Because part of it is and this is the same with even the higher self in session. Sometimes there is this frustration because the fact that we use spoken language to communicate is frustrating sometimes, because pretty much everywhere else it's telepathic, which we do have that ability. We're all telepathic in that sense, but particularly for babies and having to learn a language in order for us to communicate. The crying a lot of time has to do with that and not being able, it's frustration rather than something being wrong. So that kind of goes into the fact that, part of our contract and part of the experience of Earth that makes it so difficult, and why we can learn so much, and why the Earth school is kind of the most difficult school, is because we have to adjust in so many ways in the physical, which includes language, includes, not being in a society or a culture that historically hasn't been too open to abilities and our galactic origins and everything else. I mean, thousands of years ago that was the case, but we've been in a kind of a paradigm or reality where, this is all we have. We are physical bodies, all of that. But part of contracts for a long, long time have been, we forget all that. And that's part of what makes it so difficult here. So with children, things start happening and life happens and you start to forget things. And that's also the case, we parents, what's so awesome to me is I've been seeing a lot of people, a lot of clients who, they are spiritual. They do this type of work. Obviously, anyone who's coming to see someone who does regression is pretty open in some respect, but they are fostering their kids' memories and respecting the fact that they are infinite beings as well, and there could be many things going on and at play in their lives, and fostering what we consider to be make-believe or fantasy can often be actually happening in reality, even to nature spirits and fairies. I had a client who was a fairy in a past life, which was amazing, and I knew it was possible, but it was fantastic. And it's so unfortunate that we generally don't encourage the fantasy and imagination beyond a certain point with children. So it's just so important. And I said on a show, I'm not sure which one, that I kind of going down that same road about those children who are in an environment with parents who are supportive. It was this woman who was talking about that she knew that her daughter was pretty much new to the Earth and hadn't been there before. And she had her daughter, who was, I think, 3 or 4, had done something she wasn't supposed to do. And her mother was kind of chastising her for it and saying, don't do that, blah, 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 blah. And the daughter turned around to her and said, you weren't my first choice as my mommy. So it was pretty funny for me. I don't think the mother appreciated it so much, but it was this type of conversation that probably would have never existed 10 years ago. And I'm sure it doesn't exist in a lot of homes now, but it was a 3 or 4-year-old completely aware of the fact that she chose her mother and she wasn't the first choice. It was this whole new level of guilt that, I guess it isn't confined just to the human experience in some ways, but yeah. But we are in the time, especially, Samantha, where you said, I'm starting to remember a lot now. It's what we're supposed to be doing, because we're moving into the next phase and moving beyond, and remembering our spiritual infinite selves is what we're supposed to be doing right now. So it's great that you've been doing that process. Um, let's see. So thank you for that. Have you had or any clients had alien UFO type experiences? Yes. Um, I've had some clients who have questions. I've had a couple clients that have had like physical evidence of extraterrestrial contact. I have learned largely that it's. I guess the best way to put it, because there are those that I've seen who were kind of in this position of, I really want to know what's going on, but then I really don't want to know because I don't want to know. It was like, I want to know what's going on and that I'm not crazy, but at the same time, I don't know if I want to know what's going on. And the one thing that has always come through, in those instances, I mean, I haven't had a lot of clients with the extraterrestrial questions, but in those instances, the higher self, it isn't really a big deal, which it feels really weird to say. And in fact, the first time that I had a client that was fully aware that she was visited by energy beings, extraterrestrials as a child. They were kind of her guides and friends when she was a kid, and then eventually they had to leave. And then she has had cases of missing time and things like that throughout her life. And she was also, well, I guess she is still, really intuitive, really psychic. She had all these things going on. She would have visions. She would have the type of thing where she would pick up on people and kind of feel a nudge to tell them, so and so's here. So she had all this going on, and she had lists of questions in terms of, what's going on? Do I have this? Did this happen to me? All this. And I was inwardly kind of excited because it was my first time being able to, really talk to someone who had experiences or a history. And I got to the question with her higher self, and I said she's curious about her memories of when she was a child of being visited by light beings or extraterrestrials, and if that has continued. And the higher self just said, yes, it happened. And that was it. Because in all actuality, she was so focused on all these things that were going on in her life, including the extraterrestrials, the abilities, having visions, all this, that in a way that she's actually distracting herself from her. I don't know what happened there. Maybe I'm not supposed to be talking about this. So, yeah. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah, that was strange. Sorry about this. Am I back? Not sure what's happening. Are you able to hear me? Okay. Hold on 1 second. There. Better. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Let's see. Well, that was interesting. Let's see. Okay. That was weird. Yeah, so the extraterrestrials, there was now I'm wondering if I should be talking about it. So yeah, it was interesting because the higher self basically said that she was distracting herself because she was here to do she had a particular purpose and she had a lesson to learn. It had nothing to do with the extraterrestrials or the experience. So it was actually kind of devastating for me in a sense. Well, not devastating, disappointing for me, because I kind of said that's it, that's all. I think I'm going out of sync again. Okay. Yeah, so that was sorry about this, everybody. I'm not sure what's going on. Hello. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm not sure. That's a little strange. So that was one ET experience. I've had some other clients that were kind of dealing with that. I had one client who had kind of physical evidence. The best way to explain it was just that, and the higher self kind of made this the case for almost all types of ET contact or being, taken or anything else, is to really think of it in terms of, they gave the example of we go to the hospital for major surgeries where they open up chests and they do various procedures or cut open your skull. And we consider it, health and medicine. Not saying that that's what occurs with the ETs, but a lot of the accounts that, and I, was tortured by books of hypnosis and ETs when I was a kid by one of my uncles who would send them to me. And I lived in Las Vegas outside of Area 51, so I didn't sleep very much. But those hypnosis, or that type of hypnosis that's kind of depicted where people are screaming and they're not really fully understanding or seeing what's going on in a particular environment is because they are wrapped up in the emotion of the experience. And um, however, like if you've read any of Dolores's books, and what was communicated to me too is that by stepping outside, which with QHHT we are trained to do that with clients, taking them out of the experience and watching from it objectively, everything comes into perspective a lot clearer. So it in certain cases, for example, it's like a medical, like they're might be checking in on certain things. There are, you know, studies that are conducted, but it's all for the betterment of humanity. I have had clients who, you know, they were didn't have a lifetime, and they were taken to kind of a galactic council room, and they had, you know, were checking in on her and things like that. And I don't think she's actually ever listened to the session because it was a lot for her to handle. Although, you know, what people are shown is only what they can handle. So I'm curious if she has listened to that, but it's acknowledging that what's occurring in the stories that are meant to make us fearful and afraid shouldn't be the case, and it is kind of a ulterior. There's reasons why that we're made to be fearful of that. So that's kind of some of the extraterrestrial experiences. You asked about me. That some of that information came through a session. The funny thing is that I was in Las Vegas, which was kind of quote unquote accidental. I was born in Denver, but my dad got a job in San Diego. And something happened with the company where we had to stop halfway in Las Vegas, and the company, something happened where the position was no longer available, and basically we were stuck in Las Vegas. So I grew up there, and I still remember the first time that I ever watched a news report, and I was frozen in terror about Area 51 and on the news. It's George Knapp, if you're follow UFOs things, which I know that he still does his investigations, was talking about Area 51. They had the people, you know, in the shadows with the morphed voices and everything. And I didn't know that Area 51 was right outside of Las Vegas. And they said about, you know, so-and-so miles out of Las Vegas, and I was just frozen in fear. And that's when my uncle started sending alien books to me. And I was like so fascinated by it. But at the same time, it was just, you know, the type of hypnosis where people are screaming and having all these horrible memories. It was a lot to handle when you're 10 years old. But I learned from my session, because I had one time when I was probably 12 or 13, and I was laying in bed, and I could, like, my door was open, and I could see the door, you know, the light coming in from the hallway. And I thought I was dreaming, but it was this really weird, like, I saw little gray beings, like the grays, and they were like kind of short. And I remember panicking and then trying to stand up, and I stood up, and then something happened where it was almost like I was frozen. And then the next part, I was like falling, but it was almost like in slow motion. It was just really strange. And I remember I woke up the next morning, and I still remember it vividly. And I asked about that in my session. My higher self explained that I had no reason to fear that, and that it did happen, and that I have worked with extraterrestrials in another form. And that was kind of interesting. And it's kind of run through my family as well in other ways. So, yeah, The funny thing is now I'm not afraid of it. It was just the fear that was produced, when I was a kid, and then those books and everything else. So I also learned that one of the reasons why we were in Las Vegas is that the nuclear test site that was there, which I remember as a kid, they used to set off nuclear bombs underground, and you could hear the rumbling and stuff. And I was just kind of used to that. I was part of some type of plan where to shut down the nuclear plant, and that came through my session, which was surprising because I hadn't thought about that for so long. And then I did research because I never really thought about it, and even knew if it was shut down, and it was like shut down like right before I was in high school. So that was kind of interesting to know that. So I'm not really conscious of my contact, I guess, but I haven't had anything horrible happen. So yeah, that was a extended answer to that question. Let's see. It will be so interesting when ETs make themselves known to humanity again. Yeah. Yeah. I will share that there was last summer it was actually the client that I spoke about who had the session where she was kind of like in this galactic room with all these beings who had kind of like clipboards, and they were checking in with her. That ended up being one of the galactic councils. So not the Galactic Federation, but there's individual galactic councils. And they ended up sharing after what she, that they're checking in with her. They, through her, began communicating with me about things that were going on at the time. Which one of them was that there was actually a nuclear threat. And this was last June that I had this session with a client that they acknowledged that we had jumped onto a timeline when there was a nuclear threat, specifically from Russia. And it was the first time that I had heard that they were questioning whether or not to interfere. Because up until this point, and even like Dolores writings and other writings, it's been made immensely clear that the nuclear blast that happened in World War II was catastrophic for the universe, that it affected everything, and there would be no way, shape, or form that they would ever allow nuclear weapon to go off, because it wasn't just about the planet, but it affected everything, every civilization, everything. So for them to say that they were in this position where they didn't know whether or not they're going to interfere and protect everything from a nuclear blast was shocking to me, and a little scary, because I had never kind of received kind of prophecy type stuff through a session before. And I asked, well, why? I said, why would this be a question? And they said, well, the council is split, and that, we were on a path, or meaning humanity, we were on a path towards disclosure and information being revealed to the global community that is known and is fully apparent within higher circles, that still has not come out, and that is essential for us to take the next step in our evolution and becoming galactic citizens and knowing that we are from the stars, and it hasn't happened. And so the question of whether or not to interfere with the nuclear threat another aspect was that they, all the other ages that we've experienced on the planet were essentially resets because things weren't going the way that they thought they would. Ice age, major flood, all that were resets for us. They didn't want to do that again this time around. So, for example, all stories about UFOs being over military bases and different installations that have nuclear arms that would be mysteriously shut down, that is essentially them keeping it from becoming a reality again. So again, going back to this last year, it was just like the gravity of them saying that there was even a question that they would interfere was pretty shocking. And I said, they didn't want to do the reset, and there was a lot of things that they had to consider, and there was a debate as to whether they would interfere. So I asked if there would be a time, like how would I know what they would decide? I mean, a session is only 2 hours with the client, and so I was like, when could this happen? They said, well, kind of the ultimate point in the timeline would be the winter months, that if it was going to happen, it would happen in the winter months of last year. So that was part of it, of all that they told me. And I was like, why are you telling? I mean, it was letting the client know too, who's the one that hasn't listened to the session. I said, why are you telling me this? Am I supposed to, am I supposed to tell people? Because I know that, producing fear is not what we're supposed to do whatsoever. And they said this is not meant to cause fear. It's just, to inform you. And that they trusted me with the information. So I didn't run out into the streets and tell everyone, that New York could have potentially been a target. And if people would have believed me, I don't know. But I didn't want to manifest it too, because I know that if, a lot of people believed enough, like we talked about with the demonic forces, that it could potentially manifest itself. So, it just kind of goes to show that outside of that collective belief in coming together and not taking the back seat to what is going on around us is important, and that not giving in to fear, not giving in to thoughts that are, or things that might be occurring that seem like we're moving backward in time in terms of politics and everything else. It's a distraction, and that we need to focus on being positive and manifesting, the reality that we all want, because there is the collective belief that's more powerful than individual belief. So that I actually saw your comment, Kate. That's kind of why I just said what I said. It's a good reason to have as many people possible get into a higher positive vibration. I mean, the conflict that is occurring right now is because things are moving into a different frequency, and there is conflict that's occurring in terms of what knowledge should be released, and the disclosure is not going to happen until certain information is released, and it's not coming from a place of fear. So this went from paranormal to global ascension unexpectedly, but I do like to focus on what's relevant to right now. So concern for other reset. I mean, I was last year, because I just was, I mean, I didn't like mark my calendar, but I knew that once winter hit and we were in the clear in December and everything else, it was a little bit of a relief knowing, okay, I guess they decided to interfere. So somebody on the Galactic Council must have had a really good argument of why we shouldn't all just disappear. and affect the entire universe. So at least there's faith left in humanity. Okay. Does anyone else have questions? I think that's kind of a positive note to end on. Not the nuclear part, just that, you know, the outlook is positive. So thank you all for being here. I do, and Jackie is already on it. Thank you for doing it. So QHHT is not something I can practice online just because it can be traumatic and everything else. And if the power goes out, it would be horrible for you as a client. I do offer, and these were designed by Dolores Cannon for group formats. They're different hypnosis for groups. So I've done some in the past with Kevin Lewis, if he's still here. I did one a couple weeks ago for past life, where it was taking people to their past lives. This Saturday, I'm doing one for spirit guides. So it's helping you get in touch with your spirit team. And this could take many different forms, shapes and forms. It could be, you know, our spirit team doesn't really have physical bodies, but they present ourselves so according to what we connect with. So angels, if you connect with that. Some people see Yoda. Whatever makes you comfortable. So I have had clients or have had people come to these sessions that they do connect with loved ones who have passed that are their guides. So it's a meditative hypnosis. It's a lighter state of trance, and it just is a safe space to explore if you've never had hypnosis before. And a lot of people find it really powerful. There is space for your guide to give you information and also asking questions. So if you are interested, I'd love to have you there. And that is Saturday. It's 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. It goes about 2 hours. And if you want to sign up, it's donation-based. It is on my website, as Jackie has there, jasonqhht.com. It's under the events page, right smack in the center. So if you'd like to come, I'd love to have you. And yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for coming and supporting. I kind of like just having the conversation. I'm not very good at talking to a screen by myself. So I appreciate all the interaction and the support and all of you that have been here since the beginning. Why? What's happening? I don't know if you can still hear me. So thank you all. I'm not sure what's going on with my camera today. I have to figure that out. So it's jasonqhht.com/events. There is some space left, so I keep the group pretty small. So just be sure to sign up as soon as you, yeah, Mercury retrograde. So thank you again, and I will see you again. Have a great day, everyone.